Well, I would like to call this meeting to order. This is the April 20th, 2021 meeting of the Plan Commission of Monroe County. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Margaret Clemens.
Here.
Tron and Wright Randolph.
Here.
Bree Garitas.
I am here.
Jeff McKim.
Here.
E. Owens.
Here.
Jerry Pittsford. Jim Steenbrook.
Here.
Julie Thomas.
Here.
Amy Thompson. Okay. Beth Cates. Okay, we have 7 members and a quorum.
Wonderful. And I'm sure others may be able to join in progress, but let's go ahead and get started. Mr. Wilson, would you please introduce the evidence?
I request that the following items be introduced in evidence for tonight's meeting. Monroe County Comprehensive Plan is adopted and amended. Monroe County Zoning Ordinance is adopted and amended. Monroe County Subdivision Ordinance is adopted and amended. The Rules of Procedure of the Monroe County Plan Commission, and the case is advertised and docketed for hearing on tonight's agenda.
Move we accept the evidence as read.
Second.
Will you please call the roll, Mr. Wilson?
I will call the roll in the introduction of evidence. Tron Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Bree Garitas.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
E. Owens.
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Evidence is approved by a 7-0 vote.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, would you be so kind as to call the roll?
The motion is to approve tonight's agenda for the April 20th Plan Commission meeting. Bree Garitas.
Yes.
Jeff McKim.
Yes.
E. Owens.
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Tron Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Okay, the agenda is approved for tonight's meeting by a 7-0 vote.
Okay, moving on. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 17th, 2020 meeting?
Move to approve.
Second.
The motion is to approve the minutes from the November Plan Commission meeting. Jeff McKim.
Yes.
E. Owens.
Abstain. I was not a member of the commission
Okay.
at that time.
Jim Steenbrook.
Yes.
Julie Thomas.
Yes.
Margaret Clemens.
Yes.
Tron Ray Randolph.
Yes.
Bree Garitas.
Yes.
Okay, the minutes are approved.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, there's no administrative business tonight, so let's just dive in head first to the unfinished business. And this is the final hearing for case number 2011-PUO-04, the Southern Meadows Planned Unit Development Outline Plan. So, Mr. Myers, would you please present this case?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we've heard this one before. This is the final hearing for the Southern Meadows Plan Unit Development Outline Plan. Excuse the typo here on that first one. It says preliminary hearing. We have heard this one several times now. So I will go through a little bit of a background to refresh your memories of what we're dealing with, as well as go over some of the updates that we've seen since the last time we heard this at the admin meeting. So overall, it's a plan unit development outline plan. The purpose to amend the zoning map from medium density residential to PUD. The petitioners are proposing the construction of 95 paired townhome structures where each townhome sits on its own lot, shares a wall on one side. So there will be a total of 190 lots. Many aspects of the previously approved Southern Meadows major subdivision will remain the same, including roadways, sidewalks, water lines, sanitary sewers, other things like that that we can go over. And I will say that by right, the Southern Meadows major subdivision that did receive approval from the Plan Commission, that was for a number of single-family units, each on their own lot. Essentially, this proposal is doubling down on the density, but as we will see, and we have heard before, that there won't be much change in impervious cover. There'll actually be a little bit of a decrease in overall impervious coverage with this new proposal that increases in the density. So here's a little bit of background on the previously approved Southern Meadows major subdivision. We've spoken about this before, so I'm sure everyone is pretty familiar with this, but if we needed to go into more detail, we can. So just let me know. These were the updates that were received from the last Plan Commission meeting. So I will go over actually some new changes. There haven't been very many. In this new report, we have received some additional exhibits from the petitioners. They have included some analysis on from the Association of Realtors in Indiana, as well as some jobs analysis in Monroe County. These are exhibits that we'll go through later on in the presentation. There's also been some updates made to the letters of support and remonstrance. And also an update to the a new exhibit, as the Southern Meadows ordinance that was prepared for this meeting that will either go on to the commissioners for review or be reviewed here as well. And then there's also an HOA commitment document that the petitioners have provided that were also included in the packet, and we'll also have some time to go over some of those things in this presentation as well. So here we have the location. We're all familiar with it. It is on South Rogers and South College Drive. As I said before, medium density residential comprehensive plan has a mixed residential MUCUA and some portion as open space. So here we have the design standards comparison. There's been no change here since the last time you've seen it. All these numbers are accurate in what they are proposing for this PUD development. So as you can see, not too much difference in the MR aside from minimum lot area, minimum lot width, maximum height are some changes within those respects. And of course, the 0-foot side setback for the paired townhome design. This table has received some updates. We requested that the petitioner also include a segment down here about total open space regarding all non-impervious areas, as well as the open space, as you can see here on the bottom as well. Here we have an image of some of the items that the petitioner had prepared for us before the last Plan Commission admin meeting. We did not have these in the last packet. They are included in this new packet now. They have not been included in the outline plan yet, but we can request that they do so. But this is offering some variability in the design of the structures, because there's been some communication through the meetings about making sure that there is some sort of variation with the design, the look and feel of this many paired townhomes in a row along the roadways. So some of those ideas for variation include changes in vinyl exterior siding, stone brick veneers, exterior doors, and then just a variety in general, talking about maybe offsetting some of the homes in different areas so that they're not all just in one direct line when they get placed within the subdivision. Moving right along, site conditions. We all know that there are some karst features on the property based on this analysis, as well as a VET, environmental engineering report, that has been provided by the petitioners. We have that information in here. We had requested, planning staff had requested petitioners try and provide us with the full report of the VET engineering karst study. They had reached out to VET engineering for something like that, but I have not heard back from either the petitioner or VET engineering specifically about providing a more more fully detailed report other than the executive summary type document that we've seen before and reviewed before. Here is that document. It's also included in the packet. Again, overall, its main recommendation was that VET Environmental Engineering be on call when grading is done for the petition site, given that there are identified sinkholes on the site, and that they would just like to be notified and potentially present for that, that grading. Infrastructure and access, as I stated before, a lot of this will remain the same compared to the original Southern Meadows major subdivision petition that was approved. There will be some changes in accordance with the increase in density and the paired townhome design. So some things will change, but most of it will be fairly the same. We can go over some more of that if we want to. This item here I included in the packet as well. There has been some continuing discussion regarding this petition based on data with housing and jobs in the Monroe County. Planning staff wanted to provide information that had been reported on within the comprehensive plan. This is the McCua Monroe County urbanizing area growth projections section of that plan. So I included that in here as some information that could be reviewed because it is part of the comprehensive plan, had been adopted. So we included that here. It's also in your packets for your review, just kind of showing general trends with the data that was provided. More information.
Drew, I see some one Plan Commission member maybe has a question on part of your presentation. Is it okay to take questions at this point?
Yeah.
Or
Okay. Yeah, we've all heard this, so we can take questions in a rolling matter.
okay. Julie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of your presentation. Going back one to the sinkholes, the map on page 14 and the map on page 48 don't match. So what do we do with that?
Are you referring to the map that VET had provided and the map that we had provided? This.
Yeah. And I could see on the eastern border that VET might not have picked those up, but their map on our packet, page 48, and this map don't match.
Yes, there is some difference. I believe that these on here were located during the time of the Southern Meadows major subdivision. I'm not sure how planning staff went about identifying these because this was taken from the original Southern Meadows major subdivision packet. So I believe that there was maybe some review from the stormwater MSWR coordinator. I'm not 100% sure about how we decided where these were. I will say that VET's, although it does differ, I think that they have stated in their document that there are the potential for more sinkholes that were undefined or unlocated. Jackie, do you have any more information on these ones that we see here in front of the screen with the yellow?
Yeah, these were identified as closed contours on the GIS map. And also, if I remember correctly, they were identified on the original Southern Meadows petition plan. So I'll do a little bit digging behind the scenes. But my understanding is that in order to finalize this plat, if it were to be approved, it would have to show the sinkhole conservancy areas. And if VET wants to propose something different than our data shows, it would have to go through our MS4 coordinator, and we would have to rectify the differences because we would go with the more restrictive typically. So
the more restricted would be to take both of these maps, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be to encompass all the closed contours, and if VET found more than ours, to add those to it.
They do have others besides what we have listed here. So, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. back to where we were talking about data in general that have been reported on within the Monroe County urbanizing area in the comprehensive plan. So just going back through where we were here with some of the information that had been provided by that document that had been adopted. We can always come back to these if we want to look at some more of the data throughout the discussion. So here is the Southern Meadows outline plan overall as an exhibit. I will go through my packet here to make sure I covered most of the updates that have been included since the last time we saw it. I don't believe that there was much more changes other than the additional exhibits that I'm going to get to here shortly. So if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask them about any of the material we've already covered. And like I said, we've all heard this a couple times before, so I think it's safe to say that we are familiar with it, and there might be some outstanding concerns still among planning staff, or excuse me, Plan Commission members to ask planning staff. Here we have some of the new exhibits that the petitioners have provided planning staff, some data that they had pulled from the Indiana Association of Realtors regarding median sales price and other key listings regarding housing through the years. So we can look at this data if we want to review it. I know that there's been some discussion about that in the past about trying to figure out what the actual trends are in Monroe County as related to this large increase in density. And then here we have some other exhibits that the petitioner provided with respect to job growth in Monroe County, as well as just general trends in that category. Some more exhibits petitioner has provided. These are all included in your packets, which I hope you've had time to review. Just more information. And then here we have our letters of support and letters of remonstrance section. There has been one update in that a new letter of support was provided, and that is this one here from Farmers and Mechanics Federal, which stated about having the opportunity to buy a home and mortgages in general. So more information about how petitioner plans to have this development improve housing stock in the area. And then of course, letters of remonstrance as well. We haven't received any new letters of remonstrance, but we did receive some that were concerned overall about the density for this proposal and its impact on infrastructure and the character of the neighborhood in general. So we have those here. These are all also included in your packet. Also some concerns for environmental impact as well for all of this development, just in the general area. The remainder of the presentation has the draft ordinance that the petitioners have provided, specific language pertaining to the adoption of the PUD, as well as the commitment to establish a HOA for the property to hold some of the responsibilities that we've discussed in previous conversations with respect to this proposal. All right, so overall, planning staff still recommends denial based on the findings of fact and subject to Monroe County Highway and Drainage Engineer report, specifically finding B, which states the extent to which the proposal departs from zoning and subdivision regulations, such as density, dimension, bulk, use, required improvements, and construction and design standards, with the remaining concerns listed below. Requesting small scale commercial use so that it is truly a PUD and not just higher density housing. The petitioner had communicated with planning staff that they were under the impression that having Clear Creek Urban, which is yet not approved completely, that is directly to the west, may allow for that type of commercial use, neighborhood commercial use, to work together with that. And then comprehensive plan recommendations. Again, the architectural diversity and standards should be set forth in the outline plan to consider including a diversity of housing types. Although the petitioner has provided some details about variety in the structures and architectural standards, we still need to see that directly represented in the outline plan document itself so that it can become enforceable. And then also based on the plan submitted, it appears there will be a street tree conflict. Another conversation with the petitioner and planning staff again regarding this one, and we feel now planning staff will be able to address this during the development plan stage of the petition. And then finally, the petitioner verbally stated that they would prepare the Rose property bridge to provide connectivity to the property's pedestrian trail. And we just wanted to remind the petitioner of that commitment and bring it up into discussion for this proposal. I will now take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Now, are there questions from members of the Plan Commission for Mr. Myers?
I just want to state that I lost connectivity for probably about 8 minutes.
Thank you, Tron. I'd like the record to reflect also that Mr. Pittsford arrived around 5:38, and so he's been here presumably for this presentation because the beginning part of the meeting dealt with administrative matters. So just to let the
Yes,
record.
I've been here, Margaret.
Thank you, Jerry. It's good to see
I couldn't, for some reason, Zoom wouldn't let me join as a panelist. So
Yeah.
I couldn't have a voice or an image.
Me too. So you're not alone.
Okay.
Now I'm here. So, so are there other questions or comments from members of the Plan Commission for Mr. Myers?
I have one question,
Jeff.
and oh, I'm so sorry, I don't have it, and I know it was covered. From the diagram that Julie was pointing out, do we have more sinkholes being delineated on the geotech? Or I guess I was really curious of what the answer was there.
So it looks like, Drew, I did a cross comparison with the original Southern Meadows petition and then what was submitted now. And those two petitions are consistent in the sinkhole locations. But the VET and what was submitted under this petition differ. And so VET actually in some circumstances finds, they both need to be combined and basically go with the more restrictive is what we would recommend. There's missing on the Southern Meadows from the petitioner, and then there's missing on the VET.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry for jumping in front.
Okay, is there, oh, Mr. McKim?
Yes, thank you. So, you know, from my perspective, this is the petitioner already has a by right here. And so the real question to me is what are the legitimate concerns of the public in doubling the density, given that we're not essentially increasing the hardscape, the impervious surface at all? And to me, that comes down to traffic. So what, can you remind us of what the petitioner's commitments for offsite improvement, traffic improvements were that carry over to this PUD? I know this was discussed extensively when we discussed Southern Meadows rezone, but I think we've kind of lost track of what these changes are. And I think it's significant to this decision.
Yeah, I know that there are road improvements to be made. If Paul is on the call, I know that he has the most detailed information with respect to that, that there will be improvements. And there were actually some updates made to the traffic study again, but those were received, I think, either early this morning or late afternoon. So I believe the link is to the slightly older version of the traffic study. And I know that Mr. Sadler was reviewing those updates that were sent recently today and yesterday. So if he could speak on that, that'd be great.
He does appear to be on the call.
Yeah, in terms of the offsite improvements, there's going to be left turn lanes added to Rogers Street at the Vat Road intersection. And also the entrance there will have side-by-side left turn lanes and 2 through lanes at the entrance on the eastern approach. Let's see what else. The traffic study, we received that this morning. I made my final review, and they indicate that an all-way stop will be warranted at full build-out of the Clear Creek development and the Southern Meadows development, and that takes into consideration the 190 lots in Southern Meadows, or if considering the White Oak Trails development, it'd be approximately 80% of each of the developments to where a all-way stop would be warranted at that intersection. So, but in the meantime, we'll keep an eye on it and do periodic volume checks to make sure we keep in front of that all-way stop installation.
Thank you, Mr. Satterlee. Well, Mr. Tron Enright Randolph, and then Mr. Stainbrook, and then myself.
So yes, kind of in that same line of question, Drew, if you could touch on the commitment that they made to build out the road infrastructure as far as it is proposed in phasing.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. Yeah, the commitment for building out the roadways, as you can see on this outline plan, is pretty much the same that was approved with the Southern Meadows major subdivision, and that they recently actually have applied for a grading permit for the phase 1 portion of the build out with respect to getting the road infrastructure in first. And not doing any type of residential grading whatsoever for phase 1. So other than the inclusion of the alleyway, a lot of the same improvements and commitments for the roadways will be made. Did I answer your question?
Yes, but I guess I had it wrong. I had thought that they were going to build out the road infrastructure to have those 2 points of egress and ingress and egress. That was different than the Southern Meadows, because that was one thing I was really concerned on, and it goes in line with the traffic and congestion, that if they're wanting to double the density, I would like to see that road completed a lot faster than what was originally proposed with the single family dwellings.
Yes, I do remember that now in previous conversation with Plan Commission members and the petitioner, and I do believe that they were amenable to ensuring that that secondary access point was completed as part of one of the earlier stages for the road developments. So with respect to the phasing and the road development, I know that the priority comes with the roadways and infrastructure, and with that secondary access point as well.
Well, let me just kind of present this. For me to support this, I do think it becomes a density question. There are a few other things with the 0 line setback and such, but I do think primarily it is a density. So unless the petitioners are willing to make a commitment that they are going to build those 2 access points completely, at least by half of the units constructed, I won't be able to support this.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Mr. Stainbrook, and then myself, and then Mr. Pittsford, and then Commissioner Thomas. Mr. Stainbrook?
Yes, thank you, Ms. President, and others. I have a renewed interest in the total and overall context within which I should review this matter. I know, for instance, that all of us are interested in appropriate and affordable housing, but in looking at some of the data and other matters, and I think, if I may say, Drew's done an excellent job in presenting this again and so far, and we've considered before, of course. But say hypothetically, an investor wanted to go out and in some place take on the responsibility and any risk of loss and develop whatever, as long as that fit within the guidelines, the ordinance, and the other provisions that may be in place. Do we have any consideration of this being, not in this instance, I say hypothetically, say it were unneeded housing, but otherwise it seemed suitable within our framework. Should I give weight to the fact that this was needless? Or in this case, if we find with density, connectivity, access, et cetera, some of the concerns that have been articulated so far, some of the questions anyway, are some of the questions I have in my mind. To what extent should that be overbalanced or be contraindicated by the need or the lack of need, whatever the data may be showing? Drew, Margaret, Mr. Wilson, certainly Jackie. I'll try to be more succinct and say, to what extent is our decision driven by the need for housing?
Well, I would say, Jim, that this is a rezone petition, so it's a legislative decision, and there are standards within the report that Drew laid out that weighs and takes into consideration things like the comprehensive plan, which Drew showed a little bit before. But really, it's looking at the findings and determining what pros weigh out what cons on this and moving it forward to the commissioners for a decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And I'd like to go next. I have a question for Mr. Schilling, actually. And, you know, it was asserted that this petitioner has the opportunity to build by right. And I'd like to know the extent to which that's true. Just because we had approved another PUD, does it mean that we must approve this one? And if in the process of our discussions and our deliberations, we find other adequate reasons why we might reject this proposal, for instance, like these sinkholes, can we reject this? And Mr. Schilling, could you please speak to that? And then I have a few other points I'd like to make.
Well, I think with respect to the by right, there has been a subdivision plat approved for this site. So the person would be able to record a plat based on that prior approval at this time. But as far as the petition before you today, that is not a by right, of course, that is completely discretionary, and you're making a recommendation to the county commissioners as to whether you think it satisfies the spirit of the PUD ordinance. So there is no by right to do what is before you today. With respect to the sinkholes, I mean, again, any development plan that comes in is going to have to meet the sinkhole ordinance. And if more are discovered, then it's possible that they would have to amend the outline plan and get a development plan that complies with the sinkhole ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. That really clarifies a lot, at least for me, because this is not the same plan that we had approved previously. And so it doesn't mean that it should be approved by right. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the data that are contained in this report, recognizing that the comprehensive plan was last formulated in 2012 with a little bit of adjustment in 2013. And what might have appeared then to be accurate or speculated to be accurate, certainly by now has less relevance and meaning. I would call, for instance, some of the data that is presented in the report as an extrapolation on a speculation that by now is almost 10 years old. So while that might have been our best guess at that time, we have new information. And that new information pertains to growth in Bloomington, although it's often claimed without supporting data that we have a solid 1% growth rate. Actually, in the state, we have a 1% growth rate in some markets, and that's not Bloomington. Bloomington has probably, a 0.6.7% growth rate. So although this is optimistic and it would be beautiful if true, I just am challenging wholesale acceptance of this data, and also the changing dynamics with all the housing that has been built in the city. So I don't think that we can take at face value something that pertained in 2012 to what is actually going on in the city right now and in the county and in our community. And certainly I would challenge the justification for further density, especially on a sinkhole conservancy area, as something that would be in the best interest of the community. Third, I'd like to talk about my overriding and continuing concern for homeowners association fees for maintenance of these types of developments. That if we approve this PUD, I feel that we're putting our community members at risk for total financial devastation, because it's the drainage that would be maintained by the homeowners association fee. And if they aren't able to pay for exorbitant costs that may be incurred, or if the homeowners association fails to form, or if they fail to elect a leader who would like to grapple with the complexities of a site like this, the homes eventually could be attached and they could stand to lose everything. And I am having, I know this has come before us many times. And for me, this kind of dense building on this property, especially the plan that we have before us, cannot be responsibly justified, in my opinion. So I know I'm going to hear from the petitioner, and we all will hear from the petitioner, and I will keep my mind open. But at the same time, I just want to be clear that I don't want to give false hopes for for what is proposed here. And so seeing that, I think Mr. Pittsford was next, Commissioner Thomas, and then Mr. McKim. Thank you.
And I'll just note, Margaret, that this was the 2015, the Monroe County Urbanizing Area, which was kind of an addendum to the 2012 plan.
Yeah, and I have to just say that these data are just not really reliable. My head has been in these data, and I'm kind of having a problem with them used in this format. I'd really like to have a separate meeting about this and talk about the relevance of these studies. And there's a lot of misinformation and need for more transparency and detailed scrutiny of where these data come from. Thank you.
I do think we will get on the same page, Margaret. That's a great idea.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jerry, go ahead.
Thank you, President Clemens. I have two questions. One is maybe an unusual question about the longevity of paired patio homes in the marketplace. This is not something we've seen a tremendous amount of in this area, and I realize that the county is in transition in terms of housing needs and availability. But are there any studies out there that speak to the longevity of these paired patio homes? Are we approving something that's going to be an albatross in 20 years is kind of my question. And then my second question is, what opportunity to exist to change the PUD in successive phases, and I will be turning off my video because my internet connection is unstable. But this happens if the market shifts during the course of build out. Is there an opportunity for petitioner to come in and modify to do detached single family residences? Those are my questions.
I can speak on the second question directly in that the petitioner within the outline plan does allow for the inclusion of single family residences and to provide for a more mix of housing types and some flexibility in what they can build there. But the overall plan that you're seeing before you with respect to the outline plan is them maximizing each of the lots as paired townhomes, but that doesn't keep from allowing for single family residences on some of the lots according to the outline plan's language.
Okay, and Drew, give me again the time frame for the build out on this, please.
The time frame, let me see their phasing suggestion. I'll pull this out.
I want to say 6 years, but I'm not sure if that's right or not.
Mm-hmm. So it's included in their outline plan document. 1 second.
If you want to just leave that and let the petitioner and his statement speak to it, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's a better use of our time. And I'm guessing you don't have any indication on the longevity of the market for paired patio homes.
I personally can't speak to that. I have not looked at the information or researched any studies myself. I'm not sure if someone else on the planning staff wants to take on that question, but they're more than welcome to. And I did just pull up the development schedule from their outline plan document, and the anticipated phase 1 is between July 2021 and July 2022. And then phase 6 is anticipated January 2024 to January 2025.
Okay, so it's shorter than I had thought.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Drew.
Yes.
And if petitioner wants to speak to the longevity of the market for paired patio homes when they have an opportunity, I'd be welcome to hear that.
Julie is next.
I don't think I'm next. I thought Mr. McKim was next.
Okay. Jeff?
Actually, I'm going to wait until the petitioner speaks, so I'll make my comments afterwards. I'd like to hear the petitioner and any demonstrators.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for staff. Mr. Satterley, if you're still on, I have a question for you. If, let's say that we've got 3 petitions in this area that all sort of lead out to that and Rogers intersection, and it turns out that a year from now, traffic is horribly backed up at a 4-way stop, which I can foresee that happening. So the decision is then to go to probably a stoplight or something like that. Who pays for that?
Well, I think it would be a considerable time before a traffic signal would be warranted.
Okay.
Mostly because of they're providing the left turn lanes, which adds extra capacity to the intersection. You got left turn lanes both north and south, and then a left turn lane westbound coming out of the development. So it'd be quite a bit of time before you'd see a traffic signal. I would estimate 15 or more years in the future.
Okay, so in 15 years, who pays for the traffic signal?
It would be the county's responsibility at that time.
Okay. So one of the things, thank you, Paul. One of the things that was mentioned in the vet report, Mr. Myers, and again, thank you for a great report again. One of the things that's mentioned in the vet report is the their expressed interest in being on site as grading occurs. Did the petitioner file a commitment, record a commitment to include vet or a similar engineering firm during grading?
I don't have any specific documentation that attests to that. It could be included as a condition.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then a question for either Mr. Wilson or Mr. Schilling. One of the things that's, there's a lot of information in the report about housing costs, et cetera, and a lot of discussion about trying to provide affordable housing, which sounds great. Workforce housing, which sounds great. There's a federal definition for some of that, but we don't have anything in any of our, in any part of our code that provides for a certain level of housing in terms of pricing. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have that kind of market criteria in the ordinance.
Okay. So what can a petitioner do besides, I mean, I think if the intentions are there, that's great, but maybe construction costs come in 20% higher. I think I'm trying to figure out what a petitioner could do in order to guarantee a certain housing price.
Well, I think that there's probably a statute that prevents us from requiring certain housing brackets as part of a zoning decision.
Yeah, except probably for a Section 8 abatement in rental or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. So I'm wondering, so for me, it just, you know, it's nice to hear the intention, but just for the public's edification, we can't guarantee anything. We can't control this. They could very well sell the homes for the price that they intend, and a year later they go back on the market for double. We cannot and we don't control the pricing. It's a good thing to say that this is the intended market. It's good to put that out there, but we are not in a position as a planning commission to require this nor to enforce any of this. But I think that's just a good reminder. Thank you.
Mr. Garatas?
Yeah, a couple things. One of them was Julie's comment about VET, the VET karst firm, geotech firm. I was going to ask about them being on site during the mass grading. So I was thinking the same thing and wanted to kind of reiterate what Julie had said. Secondly, for the petitioner, I think to answer, because I think there's some questions on a planned unit development like this, we've got a lot of letters from financial institutions, BEDC, real estate, employers in the community. So when financial institutions look at a project like this, it's a planned development that's predictable, especially once it gets off the ground. I'd like to know if they consider the HOA fees within the loan eligibility of a borrower when they look at what that borrower can afford. And then I just want to clarify on the units that are near the karst features. It still appears to me that there's a bigger open space area between the units and the karst features from what we saw on the original approvals with Southern Meadows. I'll just call it Southern Meadows 1. And that's really all I've got right now. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Mr. McKim, your hand is still up. Would you like to ask a question?
Oh, I apologize. I thought before I had said I'll defer my comments. I apologize for not lowering my hand on that.
Thank you. And I just, because of Julie's questions, Commissioner Thomas's question, I have one other question for Mr. Satterley. And that is, should this be approved and should you put in a left-hand turn lane and you would anticipate that there would be no additional transportation backups, is that kind of transportation fluidity guaranteed, or is it something that could be, for instance, replaced by bike lanes? Or could you narrow the streets after we approve this PUD? Is there something else that could be done that would impede the flow of traffic? So that's my question to Mr. Satterley.
Well, the traffic study was conducted with the 190 lots in Southern Meadows. So all the proposed improvements will easily handle the traffic from Southern Meadows. And the left turn lanes, as I mentioned, will provide extra capacity to the intersection. And just for comparison's sakes, if you're familiar with the Gates Drive, Jonathan Drive intersection there in the Whitehall Crossing, I think it's Whitehall Crossing Shopping Center, that's a similar type of intersection, and that intersection can handle quite a bit of traffic, and that's just a four-way stop. So the threshold before you have to go to something else like a traffic signal is pretty high in this instance. And this will be, even with a four-way stop, will handle quite a bit of traffic for a long time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Satterley. Let's move on now, if there are no other questions from members of the Plan Commission, to hear from the petitioner and the petitioner's representative. Jackie, can you help out with that?
Yeah, it looks like Katie Stein is here to speak.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yep. Hi, Kendall.
Go ahead. All right, this is Kendall Kanoki with Smith Design Group. Thanks everybody for hearing us tonight. I just had a few things just to answer a few questions. So regarding the karst, originally we did a topographic survey for Southern Meadows, the previous approval. We did that, I think, back in 2019, and we identified some areas that were sinkholes as part of that survey. So we put those in the karst easements as required by the county. And then also as part of that original approval, we had VET Engineering go out and they found the sinkholes that are shown in that report. And then we added those as well to our plat. So the approved Southern Meadows plat was protecting all of those sinkholes that were found during that first round of approvals. And we're showing the exact same sinkholes as part of this approval. So nothing's changed there. It's the same ones that we found. And as part of our ordinance for this PUD, we've included almost all of the conditions of approval that were made for that Southern Meadows preliminary plat that's approved currently. There were 10 conditions of approval. Some of them were specific to that plat that referenced lot numbers and things. So those will have to be updated. We still have to go through, and do another plat if this PUD is approved. But Tom has incorporated almost all of those commitments into the PUD ordinance, including the karst professional being on site during grading. So that will happen. He just handed me a signed proposal actually from VET Engineering to do that. So just to clarify, that all is kind of being handled the same way. And to answer Tron's question about the roadway connection, we have in that ordinance as well. If you look at it, we are committing to connect the road as part of phase 2 to South College Drive. So there will be 2 forms of ingress egress as part of phase 2. So phase 1 will start the road, and then phase 2 will complete the road. And so that connection will be made to satisfy Tron's comment there. And I think the only other thing I had was green space. I know was talked about a little bit. We are at about 33% impervious right now, which means 67% is pervious green landscaped areas. That's about 24.92 acres, 23.35 acres if you take out the detention areas, which planning staff asked us to do. And then we are putting about 10 acres in common area right now. 10.25 acres are in common areas. And we can actually increase that. We can take away some people's yards and increase the amount that's in common area. I think that's what planning staff was alluding us to do. But again, when we come back for preliminary plat approval, we can, finalize that. But I think the point is that we do have quite a bit of green space for this development. So I think that's all I had. Tom, did you want to talk?
Tom Weiniger, Weiniger Construction. Again, third generation builder. My family's been in this community and built a lot of homes. My father started out over 60 years ago at Quail Ridge, which was a paired product. He did the Stands, he did Winslow Farms, Gables, Copper Tree, St. Remy, Villa Glen, and I did the Wick, and I've done the Highland Park Estates. But all of those are just part of what he did, and all of them were paired product. So paired product does stand the test of time, I believe. It was 60 years ago he did Quail Ridge, and I finished up Springhouse Ridge in 2015. And to talk about a need, you can just call any realtor and have them try to find you a house under $250,000 a year or newer in the entire county. And with Cook hiring and Cadlin hiring and Baxter, IU Health, these young people don't have a place to go. And I want to try to get them something that they can afford and own a piece of it and be here in Monroe County. Great place to live. And that's all I got.
And we got one more, Holland, if you want to.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Holland Knightenhelser. I work with Tom in the office daily and appreciate the opportunity to speak. I just wanted to quickly kind of remind everyone that we have a chance to kind of contribute in a pretty positive manner to the county and the community. Our intention is to create a very nice neighborhood. I know there have been some reservations about straight lines and density, but it is our intention to make really nice looking houses with plenty of variation. We're going to do everything we can to make sure it is a pleasant neighborhood, be sidewalks, street lighting. And then it's an opportunity to connect. There's a couple schools within a short distance, one of which is Clear Creek right there, with which we share a property line, and we're committed to connecting to the neighborhood so that children will be able to walk to work just up the road. There's another school, and I've caught wind that there's going to be a public library going in just to the north there. And there's, of course, the commerce over on South Walnut Street, which is just minutes away, So, and then, of course, there's the multi-use trail, and we have to look into the possibility of doing this, but we're looking into the option of connecting the neighborhood directly to that multi-use trail, which will provide people, it's not the closest neighborhood to downtown, but people who wanted to perhaps commute on bicycle, to somewhere near to the city would have an opportunity to do that. And I think that's it. I just want to kind of highlight the fact that there's an opportunity for some real positive things to come out of this. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for caring about our community and also proposing this project. I appreciate your proposal, and we all do. I see that Commissioner Thomas has a question.
I do. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. I appreciate petitioner's work on this. Did I hear you right? Did you say that those two sinkhole maps are the same?
No, I think the original one with the yellow circles was created back in 2019 when we originally did our topographic survey. And then that initial analysis was added to by the VET report when that came out. I think in early 2020 we did that. And so the site plan you're seeing here has all of those sinkholes that are shown in both the original survey and the VET report.
Huh. Okay, I don't see that, but I'll take a look at it on my larger screen and see if I could find that, because it looks like in the middle that there are some areas VET identified, and so were you not able to get us the full report from VET?
So we did have the second page added, and then I went back and listened to the meeting to kind of see what additional information was needed. And I talked to Sarah, who prepared the report, and I said, really what they were looking for is more of a summary that, hey, we went out and we found the sinkholes, and here's the sinkholes that we found, and here's how we recommend to protect them, and here's where they are. And so I just asked her to kind of provide more detail to the conclusion of the report. So she did agree to do that, and Thomas hired her to do that. We have not gotten the updated report from her yet.
Wow, that's too bad. Okay, so Drew, if you could show those maps again, maybe. I don't know if there's any way to superimpose the VET map over this development plan. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but you're a magician, so I'll leave you to try your best. I will try the same thing on my computer. Thank you.
And just to let everyone know, it's been written into the chat that VET Engineering appears to have found one additional sinkhole not on the Smith Design Group map, and it's located on the southwest site. So if I recall correctly, at the time of Terry Quillman's exploration, we had one map with the sinkholes kind of mapped out. He went out there, there were more sinkholes, and now we've got yet one more. So in lieu of that, Mr. Garatas, would you like to make a comment or ask questions?
Yeah, just a quick clarification, and pardon me for not knowing the gentleman's name that spoke after Tom from the Weiniger office, but is there a commitment to repair the Rose Bridge to the north or not?
There's not a commitment. Tom had said he would look into the cost of it, and if it's not cost prohibitive, then he will do it.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, hang on. I was just looking at the staff's report where it says that would be repaired. So I think that needs to be clarified, that everybody understands whether or not that's going to be done, or if the petitioner will do his due diligence to repair that structure. And I've seen that structure. It would be a big undertaking.
I'll give the petitioner a second to respond to that, and then Mr. Enright Randolph.
I don't think there's anything additional to add.
If I can do it, I'll do it. By rights, I can do it. If somebody will let me do it, I'll do it where a pedestrian can walk across there. I don't know if it crosses through Dave Rose's property or something like that, but if I can get that, I will do it.
Yeah, my point on that to the Plan Commission is just it states that I understood it to state that in the staff's report, and I just wanted to be clear because that was not consistent with what he said. I don't really care. I just want to understand what's on the table and what's not on the table. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Garatas. Mr. Enright Randolph?
I just have a brief comment. I want to thank the petitioners for addressing my concerns. I did think that was already in place to build out the interconnectivity of this PUD. I think that is incredibly needed because this is quite a bit of a dense development. So to relieve the congestion by adding the 2 points of ingress and egress is phenomenal. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And then I also want to take the opportunity to thank the petitioner. They invited us all out there to go check out a couple different developments and sites. And I told them, I understand the magnitude of our decisions we're making here, so I'll always make myself available, which I did. And I did go on the tour, and just wanted to thank them for the invite. And, one final comment I have is we're moving this forward to our executive body, our county commissioners, and the fact that they're almost meeting everything that is a concern, and they're just really trying to add more density. I'm inclined to support this and move it forward, and I hope my colleagues do too.
Thank you. And Dee Owens, did you have a question? I saw your hand raised and then lowered.
The question was covered, and so I backed off. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, moving on, we should hear from the public for the supporters of this petition. And Jackie, can you tell how many people? I think that we could give them each 3 minutes because there are only 10 attendees. There are 3 with their hands raised. So if we could give each commenter 3 minutes, that would be, I think, sufficient.
Okay, we can do that. The first person is Jason M. Can you hear us, Jason?
Mr. Jason M., if there's this pop-up that allows you to unmute yourself. You see it?
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
So we'll have to come back to this person. Okay. And then Pete Yonkman.
Mr. Yonkman, if you could unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. Hi, I'm Pete Yonkman. I'm president of Cook Group and Cook Medical. I had the opportunity to speak in support of this program last meeting, and we talked about the importance of all the work that we're trying to do to create upward mobility in folks in terms of education and substance use disorder, hiring people who are coming out of the judicial system. And it's programs like these and projects like these that are critical for us. When we work with those folks, what we find, and also people who are just looking for their first home, is that they do want a home. They're not terribly interested in renting just because they're trying to find a space for their family to live and to have some ownership in that. I do know that there's a lot of discussion about growth. Whether our growth rate is 0.7% or 1% or 5%, whatever it is, or 0%. Many communities in Indiana are suffering with negative growth and the challenges there, and we work with those communities. So I am very thankful that we are having this discussion tonight about what are the challenges, about what do we do to house more people in our communities, because it's a real challenge when it goes the other way. I do think that when you look at a project like this in particular, the density I know has been a concern, but it does provide more housing. And I know, excuse me, it was raised that we can't control the price, right? It could be that these houses sell for, $200,000 in the beginning and they turn around and sell for tomorrow. But that's why I think it shows the importance of increasing the number of housing options available for people so that there are more options and those prices will continue to or maintain themselves. We also see that people really are asking for the ability to have a home that they own with their own space, their own driveway. I know that a lot of apartments have been built in Bloomington. We're part of that. We own commercial and residential real estate, but a lot of those apartments have gone to students and they are not typically the environment that these folks are looking for. So I just would really encourage you to think about this project carefully. A lot of good questions have been raised about sinkholes and homeowners fees. I know those are really important questions and tough to grapple with. But I do think that as you think about this project, the question comes down to, do we need it? And is it worth the challenges, right? I know there are challenges of sinkholes and those sorts of things. strongly hope that you will consider this and find that it is needed. There are so many folks who are looking for that first entree into our communities, and they need that first step. Without it, they're going to have a very hard time finding that upward mobility that we've all achieved at some level. And we're working so hard to create those opportunities for people, and housing is a key step in that direction. So I really appreciate your consideration, and I hope you'll consider supporting it. I think it'd be very valuable in increasing the diversity within our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Youngman. And thank you for coming to our county commission meeting, plan commission meeting. Is there another person who would like to speak in favor of this petition, Jackie?
Yes, I'm going to return quickly to Jason M. Can tech services tell me whether Jason is calling in by phone or if he's joining by computer?
It appears to be a device, mobile or a computer, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
I don't think it's a landline number.
Okay, all right. I'm going to try to allow them to talk one more time and ask them to unmute. I'm not getting anything. So we'll have to come back.
Sorry, they are unmuted right now, but Zoom is not picking up their audio. It's probable that the device did not select the correct microphone within the Zoom app that they're using.
Okay, okay. Well, if Jason, if you are able to call in instead, I'll put the information into the chat. And then we have Jim Shelton with the chamber.
Mr. Shelton, welcome, and if you have 3 minutes to support this case. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner, for letting me speak on this. The Chamber encourages you to approve this with all the safeguards that need to be done. We need more housing. I think Mr. Yonkman has made that clear. I think our other major employees have made that clear. We need more housing. This is, and by the way, Mr. Wininger does great work. I'm living in a paired patio home that he built at this moment in Springhouse Ridge. I lived in the stands before that, before we had to downsize. He does good work. His dad, Mr. Stolberg, did great developments. So please understand that paired patio homes have been around for a long, long time. I've lived in others in 1976 and 1979 that he didn't build, but and as he said, the Quail Ridge has been around for a long, long time. So we need more housing. I think this density, we need to deal with it. I would encourage you to please work with people to try to get more housing developed, because we really need it here in this county. The urbanizing area plans calls for this kind of density, I believe, in this area and other areas around Bloomington. And these guys do a great job. So please think about this as you're considering this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Jackie, can you tell if Jason M. is able to speak or be unmuted?
Try one more time. Okay. Ask to unmute. Unfortunately, Jason, we still aren't able to hear you.
Okay, well, let us move on to those who would like to speak again against the petition. And if Jason M., we'll check with him one more time before we bring it back to the commission. So can you tell the people who would like to speak against this petition, Jackie?
Sure. We'll start with Maddie Kerr.
Hi, Maddie, welcome. And please, as you know, keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm James. I'm Maddie's husband. I live across the street, and you know, we just kind of moved into our house across the street from the Southern Meadows future property and or potential future property, and you know, so this is our kind of our first meeting that we've arrived to, and so I'm not totally sure about all that's been talked about. I've tried to read through a lot of the stuff, but our main concern is that about water and drainage, and the kind of the talk tonight about sinkholes is I think is related to that. already the Clear Creek, I'm not sure where the water goes or if it will all kind of drain into Clear Creek. But already, the Clear Creek has been going through a lot of floods. The house that we live in right now is a house that my great grandmother lived in. And, I've noticed from the time where my great grandmother lived and she died 14 years ago, until now, there's just been a lot of soil erosion from the continual flooding of Clear Creek. That's happened, up and down the properties that live on Rogers. And so the creek itself is just not well maintained. There's kind of a hitch right by the bridge on that road where the creek really picks up a lot of speed once it gets a lot of water going through it. And then also the drainage stuff that goes across the drainage kind of gap that goes across the street from us on Rogers, just a couple of houses down is blocked. It's not well maintained. And so just kind of like considering all of that, and then already, there's sinkhole stuff up there is just kind of concerning, like, where does all the water go? And I guess maybe these questions have been answered. I've not been able to find a lot of the answers to these questions. But I think they are relevant to the people who, currently live here. And so that's all I've got.
Thank you very much. Jackie, can you see who is next?
The only other person with their hand raised is Jason M. And I'm going to try for one last time.
Perfect.
Here.
Jason, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Looked like they briefly disconnected and then connected again.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Welcome, Jason.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Divine intervention. Boy, I knew my prayers would pay off.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Hey, I have listened to everybody, and first and foremost, I want to thank all you folks for doing a great job for our county. I know it's a lot of commitment and taking a lot of unselfishness on each one of your parts to do this, and so I want to thank you all. But I certainly hear the last person's concern on drainage. I can tell you what I know of Tom Weiniger. I'm his realtor. I'm with Milliken Realty, Jason Milliken, and I can tell you, with knowing him and his family, known him for years, went to school with his brother, they do pay attention to detail. I think too, listening to the petitioners, issues with drainage, how it would be directed, he might have some great ideas. I think it's going to be a great development. I've also been a president of the Board of Realtors, also president of an HOA. I know with HOAs, even you could have some lingo in there to, say, hey, if we don't want a rental community, that might push the issue where it's just more people purchasing homes there. That's something that you guys, I guess, could discuss, but I definitely agree with everybody else. I think there's a huge need. We just did paired patio homes out on the west side of Bloomington, sold out within a year and a half. Recently, that was at Summerfield. We just did phase one, sold out 9 in 6 months of paired townhomes that are just south of Bloomington on Stonecrest Golf Course, and have another 35 going up now. And we have waiting lists, and so it's just people fighting over them right now for condos. We have a huge, Bloomington's been known for years for a huge retirement community, so we get a lot of retirees, but the first-time buyers, you don't get a whole lot for your money on the house side, but if you get into these paired townhomes, they're a little more affordable. Lenders like PUDs, they loan on them easier. I think somebody had a question on the debt service ratio, whether or not they formulate the HOA fee, and then they do. The loan officers do. They add that, insurance, taxes. They look at every little thing when they're figuring the debt service ratio. Most banks are about 48%. Your debt can't exceed 48% of your monthly income to qualify. But I do think there's a huge need. And again, you guys are right. I looked at the stats, and we're about 0.66, been about 0.67% of growth a year, but it's been pretty continual for Bloomington. the data definitely supports it. We're looking about same time last year, 32% reduction in inventory. And I think there's like I just checked today, it was over 130 active listings in Bloomington right now. You've got 450 realtors, and a lot of them, the big complaint you hear is there's no affordable housing, and I can't find anything for people. They're getting frustrated. I hear that over and over. I think if you're, like Tom said, if you call every realtor in town, you'll hear it. In one of my realtors. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt it. The 3 minutes that we have for speakers is up. Do you have any last summary sentence that you want to add?
Last summary is, yeah, one of my realtors works full time at Catalent, and he just wanted to say that they fully support it, and they really hope that we need workforce housing if they're going to continue to be able to stay in Bloomington. I think a lot of these companies, we've got to figure out a solution of housing for them to be able to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we come back to the Plan Commission to discuss this further. I know that Mr. McKim had wanted to speak after the speakers had presented.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you to the speakers as well. I think that there've been some good comments and some of my questions have been answered. I did want to respond to a couple of comments that have been made previously. So first, I just want to make it clear that no one has said that this PUD is a by right. As a rezone, it most certainly is not. But the petitioner does have the by right to build 90 homes. And the question that's relevant here to me is whether or not that's a good deal for the community, for the petitioner to be able to build more, but potentially less expensive homes on essentially the same amount of impervious area, the same infrastructure. So while this petition isn't by right, we need to compare what the petition proposes to do with what the petitioner can already do by right, not compare it to the status quo as a temporarily empty field. It's not going to be a temporarily empty, it's not going to be an empty field forever. I also want to make it clear that this petition is for single family residential housing. I know that term gets kind of slippery, but a 0 lot line home on a single lot of record is a single family residential home. And I'm just saying that because I don't want any members of the public to be confused that there are multifamily residential properties being proposed in this particular PUD. And then on the issue of homeowners associations and maintenance of drainage, I definitely don't want to minimize the legitimate concerns raised by the Plan Commission president on this issue, because she does raise important points about the long-term sustainment of homeowners associations and what happens when they fail. That's legitimate to consider. But this goes back to my first comment, compared to what? The drainage issues aren't going to be increased by having more paired patio homes on the same amount of impervious surface. I mean, in fact, if anything, the additional number of residences could improve the financial stability of any homeowners association that would still have the same amount of impervious surface to deal with. So I think that's all I've got for the moment. Like my colleague, Mr. Enright Randolph, I do support this project, and I hope my other colleagues on the Plan Commission do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McKim. Is there another member of the Plan Commission who would like to speak? Oh, Mr. Enright Randolph.
I had a question, and I'm not sure, it wasn't covered, and it kind of goes into the impact it's going to have on the site itself. With the single family dwellings, the 90 units, they were intending to do walkout basements. And I had asked, is this paired patio home concept going to minimize the grading it's going to take now that they're going with a different design standard or design?
I think this might be for us. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Whoever could address that would be great.
Okay. Yeah. So before some of the homes were going to have walkout basements, and those were in areas where it kind of made sense with the topography. With what Tom is proposing right now, there are no walkout basements proposed. However, there are going to be areas with, exposed foundation wall, crawl spaces, that there is a lot of topography on this site. So it's not like every home is going to be built on a perfectly flat level lot. So there will be, some variation with, what's exposed with the homes, but there are no walkout basements planned.
Thank you, Mr. Winiger. Or was that?
Well, let me try to ask this in a different way because, and maybe it's just not something you can quantify, and I understand that, Kendall. There would be less earth moving essentially with this new proposal than what was originated in the first proposal is kind of my question. Because with that said, I think that could help with the cars concerns that we have on site.
Yeah, I definitely don't think you could say there's less. I think they'll be a little bit different, but the same roads are going in, the homes are in the same locations. So areas where we were cutting out dirt or filling dirt, that's going to be similar. So I would say the amount of earthwork, the level of earthwork is going to be about the same.
Then that just, brings me back to Mr. McKim's point that we're still looking at some of the same kind of outcome if they do a by right 90 units or these paired patio homes. Thanks, Kendall. I appreciate you trying to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Enright Randolph. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if staff had any luck matching up the development plan with both of the maps of the sinkholes, and where is the new sinkhole that people were just referencing?
Yeah, I can maybe see if this will help if I share my screen and talk out loud with Kendall. Hold on just a second. So the vet report here has these sinkholes shown in yellow, and what staff has seen is that there's a sinkhole shown below the creek down here, which is not in the buildable area of that lot, but wondering if that was maybe missed. And that's, I think our question was that it could be right in this area and it's not shown. So if Kendall wants to address that.
Yeah, since that was down in the creek area, which is protected, I think, under the county ordinance and another kind of, what is it, the riparian buffer requirement or whatever, I don't think, since it wasn't part of the land, the disturbed area, that it was ever shown. We can draw it on there, but that whole stream is in a protected area already, and that the woods is remaining as is.
Okay. I wasn't sure if there was something else. I can match up the one sort of in the middle or toward the north side, and I can match up the three that are shown. And it looks like I had one other one that I couldn't match up. Yeah, all right, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from the members of the Plan Commission? If not, I'd like, Mr. Garitas, yes.
Excuse me, just a couple comments. I'm not going to go into the stormwater because I really think that's been rectified through the county and just through the fact that the development plan really isn't changing from what we've already approved. The density, I was with Jeff on automatically going to transportation, and I think Paul's done a nice job in the highway department explaining and reviewing that with Tron's comment with the connectivity that the petitioners committed to on the northeast corner. To me, that's been resolved. The karst features with the separation, added separation between the built areas and where the karst features are. I don't see that this plan is, actually, I think it's a little bit better than the original plan. I don't want to necessarily use the term less harmful, but I think this is a better layout. If we compare the originals, I think that the site plan has got merit. And the reason why I look at that with the increased density is because of the component of the goal of affordable housing and the fact that these people do this every day. I mean, we've got letters from community lenders, we've got employers, we've got real estate professionals that have spoken to this. And then really at the core, I've never really worked for Mr. Weiniger or his family to any extent. I've never had any professional dealings with him, but it's certainly a reputation that has withstood the test of time in a community where development is very highly scrutinized. They put out a product that has been there for a long time. They put out a product that is predictable, and the amenities that I've seen in some of their projects are higher end than what you would find from somebody that's just trying to put out a project to squeak by and go as minimalistic as possible to gain the highest dollar. And there's not been any proof that I've seen or any pattern of development, not proof, but pattern that pushes this in any other category than what they've done in the past. You know, I don't normally speak to the credibility of a developer because you just never know, but there's such a long footprint here, that a path that has proven to be predictable. And, you know, I do hold that in high regard, along with these community professionals and people who are vested in putting their finances and their companies at risk in speaking out on something like this. So I'm going to support it. Jeff did a much better job, I think, explaining a lot of the nuances. So I'm not going to reiterate those. And I just thank the Plan Commission and just appreciate all the conversation, because it drew out some points that I wasn't expecting to think about this evening or even before, that it forced me to do so. So thanks.
Margaret, and then Jim.
Yeah, I because I have so much respect for everyone on this Plan Commission, and because a lot of words have been thrown out about affordable housing and about housing need and density need, I just feel a need to once again address some misperceptions. You know, I think that I've calculated, you know, something like close to I mean, we're doing a lot of building, people. You know, I think that we are building 664 units of affordable housing. That's before the news that's been published in the paper in the last 2 weeks. We're probably up to 1,000, with more planned for the hospital site, et cetera. And I think we're, as far as how housing units are concerned, we're up to about 7,000 units that we're building in a few short years. And if we're going to believe the supply and demand, et cetera, I think we need to let some of these things in this turbulence shake out and get a new census and see if the claims are right. I just see a lot that's happening with a lot of kind of specious data that I know would concern all of us, because we are responsible to our community. This in no way reflects poorly on Mr. Weiniger. You know, it's just my comments are specifically related to this proposal, and also for the projections for demand and the purported need. And I just am having trouble with a lot of the density, as you well know, homeowners association fees, et cetera. So I just want to put that out there and let everybody grapple with the fact that I hear the need. I hear people say that, but I'm not necessarily convinced. I've read through every study that's been put before me. And as far as I can tell, you know, the strongest need for affordable housing in our community is 18 to 24-year-old students. And I don't know how that data was collected, but I'm trying to get down to the bottom of that. You know, that's a little bit of an overinflation of our affordable housing need. So with that being said, Mr. Stainbrook, you have your hand raised.
Well, yes, thank you again. And I don't like anybody on this Plan Commission, but I'd like to say, no, I have a great deal of respect for every single one, and appreciate the participants that have attended this evening. But for my own further thinking, as we approach an expression of views and voting, that my initial question puts before me many of these positive needs in the context of looking again for me at things such as, well, most recently the sinkholes have been mentioned, and I appreciate the comments and the clarification on that. There's the connectivity, the drainage situation in that area, the density, a number of things that have to do with the development itself, as opposed to the financial availability, as opposed to some other considerations. So thank you. And again, I was just trying to be a smart aleck. I ask your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Mr. Pittsford?
Thank you, President Clemens. And Jim, when you have an Orioles hat on, nobody takes you seriously anyway, so it's okay. Anyway, my question would be, because I don't want to disregard your comments at all about demand for housing. And I wonder if there's not some sort of effort being made to do a study. We read reports in the newspaper or hear, just offhand comments from somebody who was at a meeting who heard one of the employers talk about their future needs for the number of employees in housing. But I've not seen anything in the paper of actual official studies regarding, because I know I've heard outlandish numbers associated with Kiki over here within the town of Ellisville limits, and what they supposedly told the Ellisville Town Council or the Ellisville Plan Commission what their needs are going to be, number of residential units to house the workers are going to be at Kiki. I hear Baxter's numbers going up. I hear Catalent's numbers going up. We actually see specifically in a letter from Cook, their numbers of projected employees and their cry for housing for their employees. So I guess I just throw a challenge out there to somebody within the real estate or business community within Monroe County to look at that, and also to look at the amount of worker migration on a daily basis into the county. What's the number of employees working in Monroe County who are migrating on a daily basis from Greene, Owen, and Lawrence counties of people who, given the opportunity to find affordable housing in Monroe County, would actually be living here instead of driving into the county every day, because they can find affordable housing in Lawrence, Owen, and Greene counties that they can't find here in Monroe County.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsford. Is there anyone else? If not, we can bring it to a motion.
I'd like to move in case 2011-PUO-04, Southern Meadows Plan Unit Development Outline Plan, that we forward to the Board of Commissioners a positive recommendation.
Second.
Could somebody review the conditions, please, for the record?
Drew, are you there, Mr. Myers? Would you please review the conditions?
Yes, I'm here. Staff, we had remaining concerns, not specific conditions outlined. We can create some conditions. Jackie, do you have any idea of how you want to go about making sure we get some conditions if they're moving to motioning for an approval?
Well, there were 10 conditions associated with the last approval, so I could pull those up onto the screen if everyone would like to look at what was previously conditioned on this site. That could be a starting point. And then also the staff concerns, we might have to consider how we would do a condition for some of these.
Jackie, in order to expedite this, I would ask for a friendly amendment that all of the previous 10 conditions from staff's recommendation from the last hearing on this case And additionally, that all recommendations in tonight's staff report be included with those 10 conditions as conditions of approval.
Mr. Pittsford, now, do you include the repair of the Rose property, the Rose Bridge on that one? I mean, I'm as much of a fan as anyone knows of hiking trails and including railroad bridges, but I don't want to make, I know that's not a hill that I want to die on this project. I admit, Mr. Weininger has said he would attempt to repair it if it's feasible and if he has clear title to the property and everything. And I wouldn't want to make that a condition of approval.
Okay, I'll amend my motion to remove only from my amendment the repair of the Rose Bridge. All other things would stand as written.
May I ask a question?
I had a point of clarity too after Bernie.
Mr. Garitas?
Yeah, sorry, I was reading through the concerns. Does that include the commercial component?
These conditions that you see here, can everyone see my screen here? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. These are the 10 conditions that were associated with the last approval of Southern Meadows as an MR rezone and then a subdivision for the 90 single family lots. So this does not include the concerns that we have for the PUD because we are recommending denial. So we didn't have conditions associated with our concerns, but we could come up with those.
Madam President,
Yes.
if you would, do you think it might be in order to have a brief recess so staff could put together some conditions? And I guess my point of clarity, all the commitments that were made by the petitioner and the petitioner representative, are those in line too, or do those need to be conditioned? How do we accept those to make sure that that is on record and part of this petition as well?
From my opinion, I would think that we should continue this if we're not ready to make a final motion. But I want to hear from D. Owens and see what the committee members think after that.
Well, I do have that point of clarity I would like to have addressed is the commitments that the petitioner and the petitioner representative had made today are, and I guess this could be for legal, is that, does that hold them to it?
Mr. Schilling?
There we go. I believe you would need to specify those, just to be clear.
Okay, thank you. So yes, it sounds like, thank you.
Well, I want to mention staff concerns are really kind of broader concerns, not necessarily things we want as conditions. We certainly couldn't put together a requirement in regard to commercial development as a part of this PUD during a break. But I think, as with the other PUD, where we recommend denial is, again, we think a PUD should be more than just density. It should have a mix of not only housing types, but a mix of neighborhood-based commercial units. I think that was the basis for our comments in that regard, not necessarily that we wanted it to be a commitment as a part of the passage, because frankly, we have not prepared any type of condition that would be appropriate for insertion into the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Owens?
Yeah, I now have about 10 questions, but let me try and remember what my original one was. I think that, if staff recommends denial, that there's a reason or 2 or 3 or 4 for that, and that we should hear that out. Now, I think I just heard Larry say it's more of a broad denial, is that correct? As opposed to a specificity. But when I see that staff recommends denial, I pay attention to staff. And so I would like to know very specifically what that means. I also think that we should not just say, in the interest of time, let's just say, oh, this is included. I want to hear it and it needs to be on the record out loud exactly what these conditions are, so everybody understands what they're voting for. Those are my
That's a great recommendation, Dee. Mr. Stainbrook?
Well, yes, but as someone else did before, and I'll try to be just as considerate, in the Dee has said, presented the concern, the question that I would have raised. I just second what Ms. Owens just said. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we could either withdraw the original motion, vote on it, or continue it. So Mr. McKim, and Mr. Pittsford, it's your call.
I wish to withdraw my second.
Thank you.
And I'll withdraw my motion for continued discussion on this. But I do believe that the staff concerns have already been articulated in a fair amount of specificity. So I'm not sure what else needs to be said on that regard.
Well, I agree, Mr. McKim, if I may interject. And I would simply say that in order to make a clean record for voting, I would request that staff create new conditions. And having said that, I would make a motion that this would be, that this case be continued to the administrative meeting of the Plan Commission to be held next. And that if the public hearing requirements have been met, that it be held without public hearing and be simply an action item on administrative council meeting.
I second that.
All right.
Mr. Wilson?
The vote is on the continuance of petition number 2011-PO-04, Southern Meadows PUD outline plan. Vote in favor is a vote to continue the petition to the May administrative meeting of the Plan Commission.
May 4th.
May 4th. Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, as a point of clarity, this will not be a public hearing. This will be an action item only, correct?
Well, it actually will be a continuation of the public hearing. Dave, would that be correct? We're not really, since we'll be making changes and so on.
Yeah.
You can conclude the public hearing tonight and continue this as an action item for only the Plan Commission. I had the PC.
I considered that part of my motion, Mr. Schilling.
Okay, I had the Administrative Plan Commission meeting on my calendar for some reason on Monday at 5:30. So it's Tuesday the 4th?
Yes, we amended the calendar. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, let me start over just to make sure that we have clarity on the motion. The motion is to continue the petition to the May 4th administrative meeting of the Plan Commission, and that included in the motion is motion to terminate the public hearing and have it an action item for the Plan Commission only on that evening. Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Dee Owens?
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford?
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Margaret Clements?
Yes.
Trina Ray Randolph?
Yes.
Bernie Garitas?
Yes.
Okay. The vote is 8-0 in favor of continuing it to the May 4th meeting, which is highly appropriate since there are sinkholes and the next day is Cinco de Mayo.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man, Larry, it's bad.
It's really bad, but very good.
Parks Appreciation Day.
Okay.
Well, may the 4th be with you.
Okay, so we have concluded our unfinished business for tonight. We're moving on to new business, and this item concerns PUD-21-4, and that's the Lakes Neighborhood Planned Unit Development Amendment 1. And this is a preliminary hearing, and they're requesting a waiver of a final hearing.
Yes, thank you, Margaret. So I'll be covering this one. This is a request of an amendment to a development plan that was approved last year for a townhome building. And the reason that it's coming before you is that in the Lakes neighborhood, Verona Park, PUD, all development plans must go through the Plan Commission for approval. So staff received a building permit application which showed the townhomes in the configuration in which they were approved, except for that there were minor deviation in the footprint for porches. And so what we're looking at tonight is only including the porches as the amended change to the development plan. So just a reminder, this is located on Sarah and Constance in the yellow square area where you could see down here is where they're building. And this was the townhome that was previously approved, but without any footprint towards the street for porches that would be included as part of the building permit application. So the petitioner has amended their development plan to show us what the porch's footprint would look like. And they are within their ordinance allowances for build 2 lines in this region. It's 5 to 15 feet. So they are meeting that in this area. This is a 5-foot line. And previously these buildings were right around the 12 or average like 12 feet. So they're meeting that. And then this is a view. They recently amended their application on our new permitting software program. So they have amended this from what you'll see in the packet. In the packet, there was limestone walls that were kind of a little bit further out, but now they're just proposing porches that, as you see here, will just meet the required build 2 lines throughout. And this is the other elevation. So the highway department did not have any comments, either the MS4 coordinator or the project engineer looking at driveway, since this is private, and then Sarah's City of Bloomington. So staff recommends approval based on the highway and MS4 coordinator reports, and I'll be happy to take any questions. Jerry?
You're muted, Jerry.
Sorry, I muted you right when you pressed unmute, Jerry.
Okay, how am I now?
You can hear you.
Very good, thank you. I just wanted to make note for historical record that I was not aware that petitioners could upload such specific images to enhance our understanding so quickly. And as one who remembers packets arriving by mail, this is a considerable change in the way we do business in the county. And my appreciation is expressed to everybody involved in that process to allow such continual and specific and visibly appreciable changes in a plan. So thank you to technology. Just my little shout out there, because I remember getting those huge packets in the mail that most of you never had the privilege of receiving.
Thank you, Mr. Pittsford. Are there any other questions by members of the Plan Commission for Ms. Nestor? If none, we'll go to the petitioner or the petitioner's representative.
I saw Mr. Henke on the call earlier, but I don't see him as an attendee anymore. I don't know if Smith Design Group, if Kendall, if you're speaking on behalf of this, or if Katie is there.
Yeah, hi, Jackie. Yeah, this is Katie now with Smith Design Group representing Mr. Hinkie. He generally likes to represent himself, so he may have just gotten disconnected. But anyway, I know we worked directly with you, Jackie, on this petition, and we just appreciate your help getting us to this point. I have no further comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may arise from the Plan Commission members. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. So I see a hand raised by a panelist. Mr. Steenbrook?
Well, I appreciated Jerry's comment. I think this is a very helpful elevation and depiction here of the facade for this building. I think it appears very attractive. And incidentally, this is just across the street from where we enjoyed living in the Copper Tree condominium units of the Stands, which is one of those developments cited in the portfolio of Mr. Weininger. Perhaps I'm saying that in the interest of full disclosure. Those were nice units, and I thought I would. That was before we were able to move out into the peace, tranquility, quietness, and pastoral scenic view of the outlying county. I might add that there are times when we think we might want to move back to the Stands, but those are nice, and thank you for indulging me again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions by members of the commission? If none, I'd like to see if there are members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition.
I don't see anyone, Margaret.
Okay, are there members of the public who would like to speak against this petition?
I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay, I bring it back to members of the commission. Just want to ask a question of Jackie at this point. This particular development was supposed to take place in accordance with a pretty strict development plan because of the environmental re-engineering of Jackson Creek. Has that been abided by?
Yes, that was completed.
Okay. Okay, that's been my question. Are there any other questions or discussion among members of the commission? If none, we could have a motion then.
Okay, in the case of PUD-21-4, the Lakes Verona Park Phase 2A Development Plan Amendment Waiver of Final Hearing, I move approval of the development plan amendment based on finding of fact and subject to highway and MS4 coordinator reports.
Second.
Okay. I will call the roll on petition number PUD-21-4, Lakes Neighborhood PUD Amendment number 1. The vote in favor is a vote to approve the Lakes Neighborhood PUD Development Plan Amendment based upon the findings of fact and subject to the highway and MS4 coordinator reports. D. Owens?
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford?
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Mark Clemens?
Yes.
Trina Ray Randolph?
Yes.
Ray Garitas?
Yes.
Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you very much. We move on then to the next item on our agenda, and that's item number 2 in new business, ZOA-21-2. And this is an amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, chapter 833, table 33-3, height, bulk, and density requirements.
Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you, Jack.
I'm going to take this and item number 4 together, which is the amendment to Chapter 830, the commercial industrial streetscape requirement, and similarly, amendment to remove streetscape requirement for properties adjoining bridges or overpasses.
Perfect.
So the last Plan Commission meeting, we were asked to provide a couple examples of what it would look like to have a reduced parking setback and reduced streetscape from the vantage point of an overpass or a bridge. So staff went ahead and looked at a few examples. And so as you'll see kind of on the screen here, you're looking from the vantage point of 3745, looking at 2345 West Industrial Park Drive. And this would be the property. And then I also have a vision here for you so that as you're driving past, the streetscape is not clearly visible from the overpass. And so this is what staff is wanting to recommend, is that there wouldn't necessarily be a streetscape, or there could be a waiver process of the streetscape requirement, and that parking would not be an issue within that area because there's not an access point from an overpass or a bridge to a property. So the parking setback doesn't necessarily achieve that goal. So, and here's another vantage point as well, just kind of across from the railroad, and you have Mother Bears, which is in the city jurisdiction, we'll say, but it's kind of gives you a good viewpoint of what we're talking about as streetscape, looking through the site here. And then another example, as the county with the redevelopment commission moves forward with new roadways or proposed roadways, there's going to be an extension of Sunrise Greetings, and eventually it will meet up with this Profile Parkway Gates Drive. And so here again, you're going to have another overpass on with a railroad underneath. And so that would impact a lot of these industrial zoned properties, since streetscape is only a requirement for commercial development, which is what we're talking about here. This would be impacting the properties located in this view as well. So here is the actual amendment in Chapter 833. Staff has recommended adding a numeral 27 with the condition associated with it, which would say not applicable for roads abutting or adjoining overpass or bridges. And so this would be appropriate for principal arterials, secondary arterials, and principal collectors, as well as secondary collectors. Note that this does not impact any changes to building setbacks that would still be applicable. And as this is part of Chapter 833, there is a parking setback that's greater than the building setback. And the purpose of that was to create a front forward building facade. And in the other county zones, we would typically just have a parking setback of 10 feet, no matter the street thoroughfare. And that's from right of way. So it kind of reflects it in that way. So a little bit different, but where staff is proposing to just go ahead and get rid of that for roads or properties abutting overpasses or bridges in 833. And then in Chapter 830, the current text states that the streetscape may not be required when land is abutting or adjoining a bridge or overpass, or would not be visible from the right-of-way, or would not otherwise meet the safety and aesthetic objectives of the requirement. An applicant whose property is impacted by this condition may apply to the administrator for an administrative waiver from the streetscape provision. And in speaking with the legal department, we have a little bit more that we could flesh out regarding this administrative waiver process. And so we've put something together, but just want to focus on these two for right now and take some questions that you might have.
So Mr. Stainbrook, your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you again. I don't really have a question, Jackie, but I would like to acknowledge that I've understood most of this to almost be editorial corrections or clarification of things that might, even for me, constitute a common sense approach as seen by planning. So again, I think you've explained so lucidly and understandable for me even that I can vote on this, but I would like to acknowledge that I have not reviewed this in detail from the packet. And so thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Mr. Stainbrook. Are there other questions or comments from other members of the Plan Commission?
I'll note that we did go over these changes all at the ordinance review committee. So this has gone through the administrative meeting and then the ordinance review committee, and then those changes are reflected into today's meeting as well.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to solicit the public. Is there a member of the public who would like to speak on this, either in favor or against?
I'm not seeing anyone, Margaret.
Okay, then is this, do we vote on this, Jackie?
This would be something that would be a recommendation to the commissioners.
Okay, so if someone has a motion to make, it would be nice to get this off our docket.
In the matter of ZOA-21-2 and simultaneously ZOA-21-4, I move that we move the text amendments as presented forward to the Board of Commissioners with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Yes, the vote is on petition 20, or ZOA 21-2 and ZOA 21-4, the amendments to the Monroe County zoning ordinance for setbacks under chapter 833 and table 833-3, and also from landscaping, chapter commercial industrial streetscape requirement under chapter 830. Text amendments, a vote in favor is vote to send a favorable recommendation to the Monroe County Commissioners on both sets of text amendments. Jerry Pitzer?
Yes.
Jim Seabrook?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Margaret Clemens?
Yes.
Connie Ray Randolph?
Yes.
Bernie Garitas?
Yes.
Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Dee Owens?
Yes.
The vote is 8-0 to send both text amendments on to the commissioners with a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Now we have item numbers Z0A-21-3, and that is an amendment to chapter 802 having to do with elderly housing. Jackie?
Yes, thank you, Margaret. So this is an amendment to the elderly housing, and just a note that this does not include the changes that were reflected in the administrative meeting, which included changes to the home-based business and home occupation, and that we will be taking that to next month's ORC meeting, and it would come back to the Plan Commission before review by any commissioners meeting. So this is only the elderly housing changes, which we went ahead and updated the definition to include the elderly housing as defined by the Housing for Older Persons Act of 1995. And we took out some language regarding a complex or service complex, and then also tertiary or accessory uses, which would be such as barber service, beauty service, pharmacy. We did not want to include that in the definition, and we wanted this to just focus in on a development that would be focusing strictly on elderly housing. So we already had an elderly housing use in our use table. However, at the time that it was updated, it did not include any allowable uses within any of the county zones. So we are adding it into the high density residential in the urban residential zoning districts, as well as adding condition 57. And so 57 covers whether if there are multiple elderly housing units proposed on one legal lot of record, then the Plan Commission must review and approve the proposed site plan, and any project must meet the height, bulk, density standards for the zoning district in which it is located. So I just wanted to pull up an example that we have in the county where this would be applicable. We have a property near Steinsville that is zoned high density residential, and you have multiple units on the lot that would be used for elderly housing, and it would comply with the elderly housing definition. So I think that the folks from the Richland Senior Housing are also here tonight. If we have particular questions for them, they were able to answer some questions for us regarding last month or last administrative meeting. There were some concerns about including the Elderly Housing for Older Persons Act as maybe it would prevent private development. And that was not their understanding of the rule. So they don't think that it would prevent private or nonprofit development of new elderly housing. And this is pretty commonplace for other jurisdictions that enforce or administer elderly housing as a use. And so I'll pull up some of their questions and answers, but note that they also are on the call should you have any questions on this. And I think they may want to speak as well.
Okay, do members of the Plan Commission have questions for Jackie? And if there are none, if there are members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition, could you please indicate?
Okay. I'm gonna see if Hayden Lockhart wishes to speak.
Hi, thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of context here. So as the zoning ordinance stands right now, existing properties, if they were that are elderly housing, if they were destroyed by a natural disaster of some kind or a fire or currently couldn't be rebuilt in a lot of circumstances. So that is how this sort of whole discussion started a few months ago, with the Planning Commission or the planning department. So we certainly appreciate the efforts of the commission here to take a look at this. And I think that the proposed change makes a lot of sense, especially since, what we're talking about here is, to Margaret's earlier concern about affordable housing, there's so many different types of affordable housing. This is one that's specific to, elderly folks, and they are age restricted. So they can either be age 55 and older or potentially 62 and older is a typical one as well. And this allows a lot of comfort here for a current development program to rehabilitate a lot of the housing in Monroe County that is elderly, that is all kind of bundled together. So this small piece in Steinsville is just one component of it, but there's a bunch more that's in Ellettsville as well that's linked to this property. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that people might have in regards to that project or anything to do with this particular, amendment.
And I will note after the packet went out, Mr. Lockhart and others from his team had a good recommendation that I'd like to note as well on the record that basically if we can require a land use regulatory agreement in accordance with the Housing for Older Persons Act, that would allow us to have them self-certify or state that they are following the Housing for Older Persons Act, and note that it's illegal to discriminate on housing for other things. And HOPA, the Housing for Older Persons Act, creates an exemption to allow for regulating older persons of 55 or 62 and over for a specific development. So that would be something that we would add in there as a land use regulatory agreement with an application for development.
And I would like to thank Mr. Lockhart for pointing this out about affordable housing for elderly persons. I believe that this example is truly affordable housing. And I know that Mr. Lockhart really adheres to the provision of those services. So when we are questioning, I think the overuse of the term affordable housing, we are speaking of cases that are dissimilar to this one. So in any event, I'd like to see if there are any other members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition. And if there are none, is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Well, I just really want to thank you for all of the good ideas and the good recommendations you made. I mean, all of us were disturbed this weekend to see that some of our community members at another senior housing unit are being kind of put out of their homes prematurely, and these were not affordable in any way. And so it's hard to imagine a 93-year-old person being displaced at the moment that they need the care the most. So I appreciate all of that you're doing to provide services to people and to do it in a sincere way. So other than that, is there any more discussion among members of the Plan Commission?
If I might, Bernie left a message in chat, and I just think we should not be putting things in chat that need to be on the record. So I wonder if somebody could read that into the record.
Sure. Yeah, so
Thank
Bernie Garitas noted that it was my concern at the Ordinance Review Committee with regards to changing the current ordinance in a manner to restrict private projects. I fully support these projects, and Richland Senior is an exceptional provider. I have to attend business and must sign off, Bernie. And so in my question to Mr. Lockhart and his team, I noted if someone wants to build new elderly housing units and will fund the project privately without any federal grants, how do local governments verify compliance with housing? And that was the land use regulatory agreement in accordance with HOPA. And then does the applicant still have to go through the federal government for some sort of certification saying whether they meet HOPA, whether or not it's publicly funded? No, a private developer would not have a federal level review. This is where a land use regulatory agreement would come into place and put lender and future buyers on notice. By defining elderly housing as housing for older persons, are we excluding people that will fund their projects privately without government assistance? And they state, not that I am aware of, as HOPA is not limited to projects with federal funding. So hopefully that clarified.
Yeah, and two more points on that too. So I did a little more research on that. Yeah, and it's clear that HOPA does not have any particular federal government tie-in with funding or any kind of particular overview, except when there's a complaint. If there's a complaint, then HUD can step in, and then there are pretty severe penalties if you're not meeting the requirements for HOPA, which is that 80% or more of the property has to be dedicated. You can't just say we're advertising for seniors to be residents to try and not take families and things like that and not meet the requirement of at least 80% occupancy of seniors. So that was one piece of it. And then on the second point there, I think you'll find that in general, the vast majority of these projects probably are federally funded, but it doesn't have to be that way, and not all of them are by any means. So I mean, I think that that should be made clear here, and that HOPA is a good definition for elderly, because it stops people from being able to have the 20% occupancy of elderly and then change it to something else. And on the flip side, it stops people from being able to advertise it as elderly and then start removing those elderly residents later to be able to use it for some other potential use.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yes, Mr. Pittsford.
Why are we eliminating the provision for recurrent personal needs such as barber or beauty services or a pharmacy? Is there a reason why that's not appropriate any longer? Because I would think that the inclusion of those kinds of services closely associated with the needs of elderly would be appropriate.
Gary, I think the complication comes with the fact that these are permitted in the county zoning districts, and as such, we don't really have a great use that allows for multi-use without it being commercial. So we wouldn't have a way of administering or regulating that as well from just a definition above. So we didn't see it as a way that staff could administer it without quite a bit more detail. But if Plan Commission finds that important to stay in the definition, we could make amendments or changes to this as proposed.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to cross that bridge yet. It was just really a question. And, you know, truthfully, today there may be such that mobility of those services to be able to go on site and provide services as needed without actually using space that otherwise could be used for residential purposes may be appropriate.
Yeah, and I'll say one other thing too. This is Hayden again, sorry. In 1995, when HOPA was passed, it was passed to do two different things. The first was to allow legal, let's call it discrimination, so that you could avoid having other than elderly folks living in a particular, facility. And the second piece was previously the only way you could discriminate and advertise only or take only elderly tenants was if it was basically an assisted living facility. In other words, it had all these other services. So HOPA actually was designed partially to disengage having to have additional services just so you could provide affordable housing for elderly folks.
Well, it's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And it certainly makes my question moot. So thank you very much. Are there any restrictions on home-based business operations for elderly housing?
Not unless you impose them.
Thank you, Mr. Lockhart. Thank you, Mr. Pittsford, for your question, and Mr. Lockhart for your information. Thank you. Okay, so back to the members of the commission. Any further discussion? Or are we ready for a motion?
In the matter of ZOA-21-3, amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, amendment to chapter 802, amendment to elderly housing, I move that we forward the proposed text amendments to the Board of Commissioners with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Mr. Wilson?
Okay, the vote is on petition number number ZOA-21-3 to amend the chapter 802 table to add the use for elderly housing. We are not voting on conditions for home occupation and home-based business. Again, the motion, a yes vote is to vote in favor of sending a favor recommendation to the commissioners in regard to this text amendment only for elderly housing. Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Dee Owens?
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford?
Yes.
Jim Steenbrook?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Mark Clemens?
Yes.
Charlie Ray Randolph?
Yes.
Carries 7-0.
Okay. Well, as far as items on the agenda, the last item is ZOA-21-5, and that's an amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, chapter 818, with regarding permit revocation procedure. So once again, Jackie.
Yes, so this is the last item. So the amendment that you see on the screen, this 818-3, the black text here is what exists currently. And so staff is recommending that there be a altered version that notes that this would be the procedure for the first revocation notice. Beyond the first revocation notice, there is an ability under this amendment that a subsequent violation of the ordinance would allow us to take an alternate procedure, which is if the administrator finds that sufficient grounds exist for the revocation of a permit, certificate, or approval, the administrator shall send the recipient written notice of revocation and shall inform the recipient of the specific basis found to justify revocation. With the notice of revocation, the administrator shall inform the recipient of their right to appeal the administrator's action. The revocation becomes effective the date the notice is issued, and the use must cease immediately. Now, there was a little bit of discussion at the Ordinance Review Committee regarding a subsequent violation for the same exact violation on the property. And staff felt that if that were the case, we may be arguing over the subsequent violation matching the first violation. So instead, we'd like it to remain as a subsequent violation on a property, and that we've already taken a first attempt at the revocation. Also, this is a procedure that may be followed. So at any time, we could continue to take a revocation procedure above. So it is at the administrator's discretion. And so if there are any questions on this, talk with legal on this, talk with Larry on this one, and ORC, I think we've got some questions on this one. So looks like Julie has her hand raised.
Hey, thank you. And I appreciate the revisions to the language. This is much better, much clearer, makes a great deal of sense. The appeal of the administrator's action is covered elsewhere in the code, but for our edification and the public's, where does somebody appeal the administrator's action?
Yes, so that actually, if I were to include 18-5, that is the procedure for appeal, but an appeal to this determination would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Good question.
Thank you. Mr. Steenbrook has a question.
Just to offer the same disclaimer as corrected by Assistant Director Jackie. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments from members of the Plan Commission?
I would just like to thank the planning office with their due diligence in taking the necessary steps to really look at some of these proposed amendments tonight, and just offer my compliments to everyone there to take the time needed to really consider some of this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to ask the public if there are any comments from the public. And I can't see everyone, Jackie.
Looks like we have 3 attendees remaining. I don't see any hand raised.
Okay, well then I think we're ready for a motion.
Okay, then I'll do it in the matter of ZOA-21-5, amendment to the Monroe County zoning ordinance, chapter 818, permit revocation procedure, amendment to permit revocation procedure. I move that we forward the text amendments as presented to the Board of Commissioners with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to amend the Monroe County zoning ordinance under ZOA-21-5 to amend the Monroe County zoning ordinance to chapter 818 permit revocation procedure. It's a text amendment, and a motion in favor to vote to send a favor recommendation in regards to the text amendment to the Monroe County Commissioners. Jim Steenbrook?
Yes.
Julie Thomas?
Yes.
Mark Clemens?
Yes.
Brian Ryan Randolph?
Yes.
Bernie Garitas is absent. Jeff McKim?
Yes.
Dee Owens?
Yes.
Jerry Pittsford?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 7-0 to send a favor recommendation in regard to the text amendment to the Monroe County Commissioners.
Wonderful. Well, we're moving right along. So we have reports from planning. Mr. Wilson, do you have a report for us?
I have nothing tonight.
And Mr. Schilling, do you have a report from legal?
You're on mute, Dave.
Thank you. We had an attorney conference in the Huff case the other day and got a decision from the judge. that we would like to talk to the Plan Commission about in executive session. And over the next week, the legal department will be outlining some options regarding responses to the court's order. And we would like to present those to you for your input. So if a meeting could be scheduled in the next week or so, an executive session, that would be helpful. And it could be, I suppose, before the regular administrative meeting, the next administrative meeting.
So that's wonderful. So yeah, the sooner the better. It would be nice to get on this. So, so anything else, Mr. Schilling?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Still moved.
A second. Everybody indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, anybody opposed? Thank you for everyone's hard work and for your goodwill. I really appreciate it.
Good
night, everyone.
Thanks for your time, everybody.